Superman being banned out as well, who I believe was pretty much banned almost every game, and if not, surprisingly just not picked up. But there's going to be the Joker pick.
Yep, I'm really liking the Joker pick for the side of MeetYourMakers. Only reason is because they deny the Joker with Clash P, and Clash P on other marksmen, I'll agree that he has the micro plays needed, but the issue is that he's just not as comfortable as, you know, when he is placed on that Joker. But the other two picks coming through would be Zenial and Kilgroth. Both of these heroes, very, very strong. Zenial plays in the top lane, can really just travel anywhere once he reaches level 4, has that ultimate available, and Kilgroth is one of those heroes that Riku and I have been talking about a lot. If you allow him early game kills, then he can easily just snowball through the game.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there that the Kilgroth pick is really nice, but you look on the side of NatusVanguard and they picked up a Murad who can do a lot of damage, especially in those enclosed team fight situations in the jungle, if that's where you happen to initiate a fight. And alongside that, you have Big Paws who picked up a Kresh, and that's really going to help with the engagements there. And they've gone and finished, well, not quite finished their team comp yet, but they picked the Slims, Violet, and they're looking to finish with the possible Malik or Astrid instead. So that's rather... Astrid was someone we saw into the later half of last week, I'd say, and is Malok more in the first half, but Malok didn't really have the success that we were hoping for. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, but one thing about Astrid, of course, is that she has very high sustain with her passive, especially once her health drops below 80%, she gets this health barrier, and she's, you know, she's a very reliable top laner because she can force a lot of top laners out, like Zenial, right? So take for example, now Astrid will be going up against Zenial. Issue with that is that if Astrid can put so much pressure onto Zenial, Zenial would not be able to travel at all. So that is one thing that, you know, maybe the side of MeetYourMakers have to think about. But I'm really liking the draft coming through from MeetYourMakers as long as they're really comfortable with, you know, the Joker pickup. As for NatusVanguard, I do not count them out totally. They have the Slims, and Slims usually just have one playstyle. You hit your, you land your stun, and then after that you just melt, just burst the person down, and it'll be a 4v5 then. And then you just use your number advantage and go up again to enemy team, and try to push for objectives.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that I was looking at on the side of NatusVanguard. They've got very good engage on their team, and you brought up the fact of why the Astrid was picked for. Being able to be that top laner that can kind of outplay the enemy in the sense that you've got more sustain there. And I think that's kind of a way to go with top laners as far as we've seen as success. They're really good at being able to split push while the team fight is held elsewhere, and as long as your team's tanky enough to do so and isn't getting caught out, obviously, then they can just keep enemy distracted while opening up that opportunity for you. However, you did mention the key factor, at least what you might have seen from MeetYourMakers being the Joker. I'm not quite sure if it's all going to rotate around that. I feel like that pick was definitely a target pick aimed at NatusVanguard's Clash P to get off him. So the question is, how much success can they have with the Joker pickup for themselves? It's still a very good AD carry to have, no doubt, but it will be matched up against that of the Violet and, in a sense, the Slims.
Yep, so we will be heading into the match right now, and we are seeing a very, very aggressive rotation coming through from MeetYourMakers.
Yep, it is going to be MeetYourMakers looking to head up to the blue buff, the Sage Golem, from the side of NatusVanguard, and they are going to fight for it. It is a 5-man rotation in. They get the first blood onto Murad, and that's a way to kick off game number 1 in the Tesseract Arena Valor League. We are going to see them safely rotate out, not losing a single member, not taking much damage either, and you've got to remember this, they didn't lose their own buffs at the same time. So right now, MeetYourMakers with the play ahead of NatusVanguard.
Yep, and one thing that I forgot to talk about really is Shashwat on that Praetor, right? Very good poke, and on top of that, very good wave clear, as you can tell. Clash P on that Violet, it's now players on the Violet. I'm not saying the Violet do not have an excellent wave clear, it's just not as good as Praetor in terms of wave clear, firstly, and on top of that as well, just the general poke coming through, like you see, you know, that's an 800 damage from just one A from this Praetor, and it's just so much damage. And if Clash P is just not careful, he can be easily poked out.
Well, this is the thing. In the previous week, we also saw a lot of Praetor. If we're looking at picks here that were popular, you can look at MeetYourMakers' team. Meanwhile, ShineX backing out that one. Clash P will get a bit of damage onto them, but that is the Thane, and we'll start there with talking about their picks. Thane was seen a lot, just such a great frontliner who can tank up so much damage. We saw a fair bit of Zenio, and I think the real star players were definitely the Praetor and the Kilgroth. Praetor was picked on quite a few teams, and you mentioned just the fact of that burst you can have, especially in late game team fights, where if you're positioning as well, you get that AoE damage on that, and it just really is great utility for your team. And if we look over to NatusVanguard, who might spot out MeetYourMakers starting this Abyssal Dragon, so we'll hold on to that port for just a second. This Abyssal is being taken, but will be contested for by Natus, and they're going to have to back out of this one. At least there's going to be the jump over the wall by Murad, and he gets the steal, and now they're moving on to that of Zenio, but it looks like he should be able to escape from there. And NatusVanguard definitely not out in the early game. They do not want to get snowballed, and Murad making good work of that.
Yep, and we saw Zenio actually coming down from the top lane using the ultimate to try to join the fight, making it so that, you know, they have the numbers advantage. And Zenio actually successfully chased like 2-3 players off. But seeing Murad is there, Murad has his ultimate stacked up ready and could easily just use the temporal turbulence. No, sorry. Wait, let me just remember the skill. But basically the ultimate for Murad, and because of that itself, then the team really have to be really wary of Murad when he's around. Murad is a good pick because you can land down really good poke in lane and then yet be able to just get away really quickly as well.
Yeah, and that's what we saw there. Not in lane, but actually able to steal the objective for his team, where it looked like they drew a fair amount of attention of MeetYourMakers away from that Abyssal Dragon. As you mentioned, that Zenio was trying to chase down a few of them, and then Murad just over the wall able to get the steal for his team. And meanwhile, we do see NatusVanguard pushing their lead even further by taking the first tower of the game, that bot lane tower. And I think this is something that's going to point on, but Clash P getting jumped on over the wall. Looks like we will have a bit of a fight down in the mid. Murad taking a lot of damage, but dealing out as much as he can. And he will trade out for the Praetor. I think Clash P picked that one up in return. Or it's actually going to go over to the Slim, so they didn't lose out there. But NatusVanguard, that team is built up of heroes we've seen before a fair bit in this tournament, yet we haven't seen this kind of team comp be put together quite just yet.
Yep, I mean, not this team comp, at least. Murad was caught out there. Issue with that is that there's one thing that I wanted to talk about before that, but then I'll just quickly, you know, just deal with this first. Murad was caught out there, but his team just responded really quickly. NatusVanguard just went in, pick up a kill, and then, although we see a Thane, we see a Thane on the side of MeetYourMakers, but it wasn't enough at all. Quite missing a lot of those charges, and that is one thing. Oh, there you go once again. But they put himself in a very dangerous position, and this is what I'm talking about. Shiny on this Thane really have to reconsider when to use your charge and what have you not.
Although you're right about that, he needs to be careful because moving into the late game, it's going to cost him even more. Boss on that Kilgroth will be able to escape. We're going into a quick pause, but it looks like someone just jumped into the middle of a team fight they do not want to be in. I believe that's the Zenio ended up in that position, so we'll have to see how that plays out once we resume, and we're just about to. But there is the Joker right next to him. Didn't actually catch a glimpse of him, so we'll see what happens, whether he's able to escape. We do have a Praetor coming in, the AoE damage poke coming through. He's going to try trade out, but instead there's going to be the return ultimate coming through by Big Paws on that crash, able to open up a window for his team to pick up those 2 kills. Now Clash P just has to escape back to the safety of that tower, and they are able to do so. But you can still see that there's a few people from NatusVanguard in the enemy jungle playing it a bit dangerous. And there's going to be the back from Murad able to get back to base safely. You were talking about ShineX on this Thane, and I think was mentioning that into the late game, it's going to mean even more the fact that if he misuses that charge, and at this point, he's still tanky enough to handle the damage. And in a way, you'll think his tankiness will scale up, but it's more the fact that if he gets mispositioned in that late game, it could just cost his team the team fight and possibly the game.
Yeah, but a ton of this Valiant charges the Thane used. But besides that, actually, that we are seeing that Joker is actually playing in the bot lane. There is nothing wrong with that. Usually you place the marksman in the bot lane itself. Chipmunk may be caught out here, but will be able to get away to safety. Issue is that Clash P usually would play the marksman in that or the mid lane. That way you can easily push out, you can get your farm, and you can basically get a lot of the farm, of the set farm, and then you can get ahead of your enemies. Issue is that the Joker now is in a very uncomfortable spot.
Very uncomfortable indeed. Almost goes down, but he gets the roll back in, and looks like he'll get out of that fight. And Zenio going to jump in with the defense there to help him out. But look at this, NatusVanguard rotating into the mid lane. Not quite able to get the damage he wanted. Ash on that Murad jumping in, but it did force the side of MeetYourMakers back, and they might be able to put some pressure down. But you can also see Thane rotating from the top lane, but this leaves both the side lanes completely open, no pressure being put down, and we'll just see how they decide to play this one out. But Natus might even back off themselves.
Yep.
Oh, but it's going to be Shine with the charge in, and it opens up for some big damage coming through Raider, and that's going to be the Crash going down, and soon to be that of Astrid if she isn't careful, getting caught up in the slow. And you could also see, meanwhile, the Slims just able to sneak away through the back. And that's going to open up Abyssal Dragon, the second Abyssal Dragon of the game. And although MeetYourMakers started it last time, it was NatusVanguard for the steal. Astrid looking around to see if they could get anything. And they are going to get spotted by the Thane, but back to safety. So that surprisingly turned very much in MeetYourMakers' favor as soon as that Thane rotated down.
Yep, and that is the thing that I was talking about earlier on. Valiant Charge is a very, very strong ability because it can change the course of team fights, as we saw, like so. But the issue is that, you know, Shiny X really have to be super consistent with how he's using those Valiant Charges. Had that not hit, or had that just went in a very, very wrong position, or if the enemies or the side of NatusVanguard actually dodged that Valiant Charge, then they would have placed himself in a very uncomfortable position like that of Joker earlier on, and it would be really, really difficult to actually even salvage the situation, if at all. The side of MeetYourMakers, what they really have to do, right, is just to try to scale in the late game. Granted, Violet will be super strong in the late game, but even then, they will have much more of an opportunity in that late game compared to, say, now, because you need Kilgroth to have those sustain, those damage items, and basically just have the entire team just scale up, especially for that of Praetor, Joker, and Kilgroth.
Oh, you can see both teams there rotating down to this bot tower, and it looks like MeetYourMakers going to go all in, take. They get it. Whether they back out is the question, but they see they have a damage onto Big Paws. They're going to take him out before he even can use the ultimate, and this is going to be a fight for MeetYourMakers from here on out. Clash P trying to dash away. They do get out of there, and that might be all they get. Meanwhile, Praetor on the backline was being attacked by that Astrid. Does get to the safety of his team, but Murad going to jump in onto Shiny, and that of the Zenio takes them both down alongside the Astrid and the Slims. And they're going to be able to win that one out. And now it is fairly even. We've got 21.3k on the side of NatusVanguard and 20.9. In terms of objectives, however, it is slightly in favor of NatusVanguard. So it's very important that MeetYourMakers were able to take that bottom turret when they did.
Yep, definitely. And now they are moving the attention to actually this mid-tier turret. Astrid, like I mentioned earlier on, Astrid is just so very tanky. He survived, or rather she survives, just so much damage, you know, during that particular chase itself. Damage from Praetor, damage from the Joker, damage from Zenio, and still yet able to pick up a few kills for herself. And that's because of her ultimate, right? It resets whenever she hits, and it's just so very, very strong in this mid-game. What I was talking about earlier on is that, you know, just allow MeetYourMakers to get to scale into that late game and hopefully be able to find a team fight, a good Valiant Charge, not this one.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that Valiant Charge. Not really enough of a team nearby. Praetor too far back near the turret, but he is going to reposition himself to get some poke damage. Meanwhile, picking up that of Clash P, and they have separated the Murad for a second, but he should be up to get out there. Shiny on that thing, going in fairly deep. He's got to believe in the tank he's built onto himself, and there's going to be the ultimate used from that, the Metamorphosis off of the crash, but no engagement from the side of NatusVanguard, so they're slowly slipping, and I believe you mentioned that. But we do see Astrid in the off lane able to push down that top tower, doing some good work, and we talked about that in the draft would be quite a strong point of the pick for Astrid.
Yep, and we saw this before. We saw actually a particular team actually just pushing down the lane with Zeno, opening up so much space and so much of the jungle available for his own team, and it was simply because the enemy did not pick up that push. Very similar to what we are seeing here. So Shinjik just went in for the push, a very sneaky one at that, and yet no one figured out until it's too late. Like no.
Yeah, and in return it will be MeetYourMakers to get a top tower for themselves. And we will see a possible engagement coming through from Natus, but Zenio going to use the ultimate to escape from that fight. However, there's going to be the poke damage coming through by the Praetor onto Clash P. Meanwhile, Joker gets that of the Slims, and they're going all in. MeetYourMakers taking them down one by one. Big Paws the next target here, and Astrid getting deleted the second they jump in. Big Paws the last one to survive. Murad actually wasn't in that fight for the most part. He backed off early. He could look for the steal here on the Dark Slayer because a lot of MeetYourMakers are low and clumped together. The question is if he has the damage, if he has the knowledge, and he isn't going to go in soon enough, so they get that one without any contest. So MeetYourMakers turning this game around. What looked like a NatusVanguard game from the start, very much starting to go in favor of MeetYourMakers indeed.
Yep, like I said and I mentioned earlier on, all they had to do was just to hold on, wait out, because there is one thing about NatusVanguard is that they might have a very good early game, but the issue with them is that they cannot quite hold out to that of late game. It's either they end the game really soon, or they will face consequences or hardships along the way to finishing out the game. So all MeetYourMakers really have to do is just play to their strength, which is the late game. And now this mid-tier turret with a Dark Slayer buff may probably just go down Praetor with that A, missing everyone.
Meanwhile, Kilgroth, I think, is soloing the Abyssal Dragon, and he's 7-0-2, so in the best shape he can be, highest level on his team. He's just going to go right on in to the enemy jungle, and they're going to engage this fight, taking out the Murad, who's caught out on his own. Meanwhile, Clash P on the backline just can't do anything against this enemy team because they cannot get back to the enemy backlines where they need to put the damage down, and Slim's soon to fall under his own turret, but that tower is no longer existent, and they're going to push on through to the high ground tower, and they might just let Shinex take that, tank that one up. But there is going to be the Crash and the Violet trying their best to defend it. It is the last hope for the team for now. Still 10 seconds until Murad is even up. But there comes the minion wave, and they're going to push on through. The best Big Paws and Clash P can do at this point is just stall it out, get back to the base, make sure they don't go down, and reset the death time is even longer because here comes Murad going in, but it's too late. MeetYourMakers with the damage, especially Kilgroth right up there in the front line, able to take it down with ease. And that is going to be the game number one, going over to the side of MeetYourMakers.
Yep, that game, MeetYourMakers was really shaky in the beginning, but like I mentioned, I am boss. You give him, or on the kill god, give him a couple of kills, give him a little too many kills in that early game, and what happens is that he's just able to tank up, get his items, and with that, just able to just jump in onto Ash here, as we saw, and not afraid whatsoever because of the teamwork it's there, and also because of the amount of sustain that Kilgroth has in that of the late game. And so this is really, you know, the fight that just defined the entirety and why the side of MeetYourMakers won.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to the fact that although the side of NatusVanguard, they played a good early game, they didn't really push the lead that they had enough. And one more thing would be that of their team comp. It was a bit of an interesting one. We said we've seen these picks before. A lot of them are in the meta, but we haven't seen them all put together like this. And maybe that's the reason we see a much stronger team comp coming out of that from the side of Meet Your Makers. The Praetor, the Joker on the same team, Zenial for the defense, and Kilcroft, who was the MVP of that match, really had to give it to him for just pulling through, as you said, got a few kills under his belt, and then I would say snowballed from that point pretty much.
Yep, pretty much snowball from that point. But that's one thing that NatusVanguard obviously have to can do much better, and that would be crashed, right? A lot of times, you know, when you have a Thane, it's your Valiant charge that matters most. When you're a Crash, what really matters is firstly your health barrier that you get, that you can actually give your allies when you do your jump, your B. If not, then your Metamorphosis. And that will change team fights. Metamorphosis people into, or players into the wall, and what happens that you stun them, and with that, your allies, yourself, get a movement speed, can just jump onto them. And you have Murad as well. You can easily just, you know, go in for those very tight spaces team fight, like you were mentioning earlier on. Use your Metamorphosis, get Murad in, clean up, and you are pretty much set for the entirety of the game. But it's just that, you know, Meet Your Makers know their win condition. They know that all they have to do is find big spaces to fight in, where they can move around, where they can just maneuver around and try to find picks. Kilgroth has got really good dive as well. Went in immediately for Ash and got one of the team, and there's one of the team fights where Kilgroth just went in for Clash P on that Violet. So these are, you know, very noticeable plays that can actually change games around.
Yeah, you were talking about for the side of NatusVanguard what could have worked for them being that of the Murad and especially the Crash, with that of the ultimate, the CC Baz, that engage they had to rely upon. But what I noticed throughout the team fights, it just seemed like a bunch of mispositioning. First of all, in that last team fight we saw there prior to the high ground turret being taken down, we saw that Murad was caught out of position, and then Crash had to go in and use the Metamorphosis anyway. It wasn't well placed enough. It wasn't enough to actually... You had to take the moment, and that's what the side of NatusVanguard were missing. They were not positioned ready to take that team fight, and yet the side of Meet Your Makers, who were so far ahead, the Kilgroth could just go in frontline tanking and destroying, and the rest of the team would follow. Meanwhile, that means no damage is going onto your backline carries, such as the Joker or Praetor. And alongside that, you've got the Thane. It's just a whole mix that by the end game, when you get to these team fights, it's so hard to play against because they were just that much further ahead.
Yep, but there's one thing as well, it's that although Joker actually initially struggled in their bottom lane, but they just pulled through and they actually played into that late game. One of the moments I see was that when Joker actually used the ultimate canned laughter onto Slims, Slims thought that he was saved by the turret. He could have easily just went back, but instead he actually went back into the turret, hid behind the turret, and Joker just went in with canned laughter, pick up the kill, and it was pretty much a done deal then. And there was really nothing much that the side of NatusVanguard could have done. And don't get me wrong, NatusVanguard had a gold lead. They had a very sufficient gold lead, like 3K, 4K in the mid part of the game. But Meet Your Makers just they were just able to not fight. And this is one important thing that players have to take away. It's not that whenever a fight is forced upon you, you have to go in for the fight. You can just back off, know that you're under farm, know that you're under gold, and then just pick a fight another day. Like, request a duel another day.
Yeah, indeed. And that really brings me to the similar point that you mentioned about Meet Your Makers for fights that they chose to take. You saw in the early game, you mentioned Joker wasn't doing so well. However, it kind of got to the point where when they pushed for that bomb tower, they did it as a team. And after that, everything they did for the most part as a team. There's one really big team fight where it looks like maybe they would be under pressure from the side of Natus. And if they had won that, it probably would have swung and continued to go in Natus's favor. But then the Thane came in with just a very good charge that was able to set up that team fight for them. And that was what they rolled off the back of. And I think overall played that game very smart, very careful. And as you said, they just held out long enough to get a footing, a ground of their own and not lose that. Because they could have easily been rolled the other way by NatusVanguard, who had the early game. So that's where it goes there. I must give it to the fact that Murad also stole that early Abyssal Dragon. If that hadn't happened, maybe the early game would have also gone in favor of MeetYourMakers.
Most probably true, but we'll never know what happened then or what will happen if that happened. But NatusVanguard, they have been known, they are known to be able to just, snowball in that of the early game. But then when it comes to the mid and late game, they just get really, really shaky unless they have their very comfortable heroes. That's why I said that, draft plays a big part when it comes to games like this. MeetYourMakers, they obviously had the upper hand. They took away the Joker, one of the priority takeaways that I was mentioning about. And on top of that as well, they have a very good harasser in forms of Kilgroth, and on top of that, Praetor as well. So Praetor can clear lane really quickly. Kilgroth can just stay in a fight forever. And with that, MeetYourMakers pardon me, really had, the game already won, 50% of the game already won. It is just it's just down to how they play. And NatusVanguard, of course, I think one of the biggest weaknesses would be placing your marksman in that mid lane, especially if your marksman is not very versatile in terms of the character or the hero selections.
Well, we will have to see how the draft for game number 2 goes as it is ready. So we'll jump right into that. And my prediction here could be that the side of MeetYourMakers might even ban out the Joker. It is a possibility if they really don't want Clash P on that Joker. And there we have it. It's going to be Superman and the Joker bans coming on through. And now something that NatusVanguard, I believe, NatusVanguard let the side of MeetYourMakers do was pick up the Joker as well as taking Praetor. In a lot of the last week matches, we saw Praetor on the enemy team to match that of the Joker as a backliner, at least in terms of damage output. And I think that worked out very well and scaling. But here we are going to see, once again, Clash P doesn't have the option to go for Joker, is going to have a second try at that Violet. But the big point here is they did give the side of NatusVanguard that Zephyr's pick.
Ooh, I'm really liking what is happening right now with the Lumber pickup. So it might be a patrol squad with the Zephyr's, the Lumber, and with that, a ton of CC, a ton of damage coming through from the Zephyr's, and that is why we constantly see Zephyr's getting banned out. And with the Malak, if they actually put it through, it's just so very, very strong. As for the side of MeetYourMakers, one more point as well, NatusVanguard do not have a mage whatsoever. But for the side of MeetYourMakers, it's a more well-rounded team comp overall. They have their marksman, they have a very good tank. In fact, they have 3 very good frontliners, very good poke from the backline in terms of that Lindis and Shashwat, once again on that Praetor. So very good, well-rounded comp for the side of MeetYourMakers. NatusVanguard, they have a very good patrol squad. So it's just down to how they play their team comp and whether or not it's to their win conditions.
Now, I can see NatusVanguard have gone for a fairly similar team comp to the last game, and I am questioning that. As you mentioned, it could be for the roaming potential they have there, and I think up to that is going to be down to how they play the early game and how much they utilize that if they are able to get the lead. But looking at the side of MeetYourMakers, it's a very similar team comp as well. But in this sense, I would have to really give it to them for the draft. But I think that they came out on top once again. That is at least my bet. They got the Praetor on their side. They got that of I think the Crash as well, or Kilgroth.
Yeah, Crashed and Kilgroth, both sea monsters.
And so it's just they got the full combo there. I really am looking at MeetYourMakers in terms of draft for, I'd say, late game going into this one. If they play it the same way they were able to, holding on in that early to mid, and then just really starting to make the team rotations, I think that's where their strong point is. Whereas NatusVanguard, it is a bit of a question to me as whether this is a team comp they're trying to make work out, and they just weren't able to pull off last game because they do have a lot of similar picks coming on through.
Well, for the side of NatusVanguard, right, one thing's for sure, Slims has got a very decent early game. I'm not saying very, very good, but decent early game. As for the side, as for Violet, you really need to scale into the late game. Thus, I do understand why they put a Violet in that on mid lane. Thus, you get a farm faster, much faster, and you can scale into the late game much faster. However, in that bottom lane in this game, we will be seeing a Lindis and a Crash. Most probably that team comp will be down at the bottom by the Abyssal Dragon lane, and with that, they can actually put down a lot of pressure against whoever that they're bottoming against. So that is one thing to note. MeetYourMakers, they may not make the same mistakes all over again, but this time NatusVanguard actually goes in for the counter rotation.
Yep, so they learned from last time that MeetYourMakers probably going to go in for the aggressive play, so they did the counter invade on the opposite side of the map, so both teams actually taking away the might buff from them, and they're going to now just rotate back into their Sage Golems, and that's going to play out fairly safely unless the side of MeetYourMakers check their enemy jungle there, but they are going to instead rotate back. So everything fair and even for the start. I think first game was a bit of a learning game, learning how each team plays for themselves, and there's actually going to be the Lindis in the mid lane. I guess prior to your prediction there, and that of the Praetor alongside the Slims who's jungling for them. Or actually, that's a Crest jungling, my bad.
Yep, I don't see why they would actually change up how they actually play it or who actually plays where, because Praetor didn't quite have any issue.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay, so a lot of damage went onto that of, I believe, the Lindis, who was able to dive back to turret. Very close to death, very close to a first blood going on through there very early in the game. And I think kind of similar, although we saw it even quicker in the first match, as MeetYourMakers were the ones to invade and pick up a kill for themselves. So far, both teams still keeping it even, but we'll see if anything comes out of this mid lane here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think there will be, anything much be happening. But this is the thing that I'm talking about. We are seeing Lumber and that of Zephyrs just roaming all about from the bottom to the mid after they're done with clearing the jungle. And this is a very, very scary combo because Lumber has a knockout, has a stun, has a chase, a charge as well to be able to just go in. And then you have Zephyrs that can just clear up. And no one really wants to get near Zephyrs anyways because of how much damage he puts out in that of the early game. So NatusVanguard, if they play their team comp right, they have a chance to just snowball really, really hard.
Ooh, but the Slim's going to miss the stun, pushing out the kill graph, and that's going to be Clash P picking up the first blood, and they take down that of the Crash as well. 2 kills to 0 for the side of Natus, and they're doing an early rotation down to the Abyssal Dragon that spawns. So you can see the timing there on that engagement to start and put pressure, make sure that a few of the enemy team are going to rotate back to, or be put back to the base. And it just provides that much of a safer opportunity to take that initial objective.
Yep, and back to my point, I don't see... There you go. You see Shashwat's damage onto Clash P. I don't see why they would change up how they are actually putting where the heroes are, because Shashwat, or rather that Praetor, just did very, very well earlier on against that of Clash P on that Violet. And whereas for Lindis do not have the burst, like after the tactical role. So I'm really lost as to why so Praetor we place in the bot lane as priority over, in that of the mid lane. But, this is the team's decision. Maybe they have another plan in mind. Praetor can't exactly push tower as well. So I'm still trying to figure out as to how, as to the reason behind MeetYourMakers, putting their Praetor in the bot lane. But one thing's for sure, this is basically deja vu of what happened in the previous game. We see NatusVanguard actually having that early game lead, and basically MeetYourMakers trying to come back from that early game.
Yeah, if I had to take a guess onto anything, it could be the Lindis for the vision of that top rush, and you just have that much more safety in the mid lane by putting the Lindis there. And there's one decision. Other than that, the Praetor, just the damage trade-off against that Clash P we saw previously when they were fighting in the mid lane. And once again, it's going to be the same situation. Meanwhile, it looks like Zenial might be getting caught out there. But no, should be able to get back to safety. He actually dived over the wall, I think, to steal or keep his own farm. But now there's going to be Melindis caught out without vision in that top side. And Zephyr's going to jump in deep for the kill. And they're going to be able to secure that one. And Zenial was not there in time to save them. Not quite, indeed. And meanwhile, in the bot lane, you have 3 members of MeetYourMakers there. Not quite the best timing for them to not be around to help save out that of the Lindis. Perhaps if Crash was up there, could have done something about it.
Well, it's still decent time for Shashwat to go back into the mid lane. I mean, 3 kills to nil. There is something wrong that, you know, MeetYourMakers is doing, or that not doing. Basically, something that they're not doing that is affecting the match this much. 9.8k to 9.3. It is not quite a big lead just yet. I mean, they still have a very decent late game team comp, the side of MeetYourMakers, but they need to start making small correction in this early game leading up into this late game, like they did in the previous match.
Yeah, we will have to see that indeed. And I believe that comes down to when they're together as a team. But right now they are not. They are getting caught out, jumped on. There's going to be Crash trying to push the enemy backwards. The last one standing for that mid lane. And he will be able to get back to the health. He's able to tank up enough damage. But they, meanwhile, took out that other Lindis. And I believe the kill graph. And now ShineX back to normal form. Does not have the defense to keep on defending, and the second Abyssal Dragon more than likely going to go over once again to NatusVanguard. And as you said, if MeetYourMakers aren't able to do something about this, is very quickly going to be a NatusVanguard game. And I think this is what we talked about in the first match. They had the potential there, and this is why we see a very similar team comp coming out once again from them. However, this time they have the Malik in the top lane being that split pusher for that team. While keeping a very much, as you mentioned, patrol squad, I believe you said. So these roaming heroes, they're able to move around the map together and set up those kind of ganks.
Yep, I mean, just looking at this, like I mentioned earlier, MeetYourMakers really have to start making small corrections at this time, just so they can actually, you know, be able to come back in that mid-late game.
Well,
they
might be one of those corrections as they do jump down in the bot lane to take out Clash P, but you can see the retaliation here. Lumber and Zephys have rotated down. Slim's not quite able to join up as he has been held off by the kill graph, but it won't matter. Zephys is enough to take down the Lindis with the ultimate, and Lumber, as you mentioned, just able to frontline it all. And ShineX going to get caught out in a bad position, might be forced to actually use the Metamorphosis, and that's going to be whether the side of MeetYourMakers can turn it around is the question. But going in, there's so many low health targets, but no one gets caught out, and NatusVanguard able to escape that one without any losses. Meanwhile, Malik has been going for the top tower. They might trade out for this bottom one though. Big Paw is still there, and Clash P with the rotation should be able to save that.
Well, and that is the issue. Kilgoth has went up to try to go up against Malik and will be able to pick up a kill for himself with the help of Zenu. And now this top tower will definitely fall. So I'm really liking what MeetYourMakers is doing now, or rather they are starting to find their footing. They are starting to find what clicks, what works for their team comp, and they're making lesser and lesser mistake, which is the first step to correction, right? I mean, always the first step is denial, and then afterwards you learn to accept, and then you basically make correction. So as long as Lindis, we saw many a times, the only reason NatusVanguard can actually win those team fights is because Lindis get jumped on by Zephys. So use your vision well, and Lindis can probably still come up, or the side of MeetYourMakers can still come on top. Zephys now trying to find Lindis.
Yep, and we will see that is a bit of a rotation down here to the Abyssal Dragon. They have the man advantage for the side of MeetYourMakers, but that soon could change around as Lumber makes the rotation down, and they're just leaving it up to that of the Kilgraph to solo Abyssal. He will be up to secure it for the team. And now NatusVanguard have a choice whether they want to go in for the engage. There's going to be the stun over the wall by Slims, but they get the turnaround. There's not used, actually used onto Clash P, is able to sum them up. 2 fights going on at once. The bot side will get that of the kill onto, I believe, the Zephyr, so a big target, followed by the Slim. Zenial joining in on the fight, able to turn this one around possibly, but trade-offs going down everywhere. It will be that of the Zenial to fall in place, and it's going to be Valinda's getting caught out on her own. Is there next to the Killgrove, to the Crash, but it's about what it can do. Clash P with the trade out, with the double kill, is going to be able to escape from that to the bot lane, and now Malik is going to get taken out. So just trade off everywhere, and at least it is not a one-sided fight at all. MeetYourMakers holding on to that fight for their dear lives. They were able to get the objective and win out that fight. I'd say that's a win overall for MeetYourMakers, just being able to hold on.
Well, that was a long fight, but MeetYourMakers now slowly, and not just softening the gold lead, but actually getting the 2k gold lead, or rather 1.5k gold lead. It's pretty impressive, I must say. Although the mid lane is pushed, but all will be well. The next big team fight will probably still happen against around that of Abyssal Dragon, but Slayer is now up. And we saw how tanky Killgrowth is, and we saw how basically mobile that of Clash P on that Violet is as well. And that is the issue really for the side of MeetYourMakers. You cannot quite allow Violet to just poke in from the backside, but now Balls will be taking so much damage from Killgrowth.
Yeah, and we do see Ash on that Slims might be the first to go down as he gets dived on underneath the turret. Malik going to make the rotation down to try trade something out, but he doesn't really have the damage there. And they're going to allow Zenial to actually rotate up to this top tower, and he will get a decent chunk of damage, but Big Paws with a rotation up could be up to stop that. I don't think so, and it is going to go into the hands of that Zenial, able to do a great job at split pushing for his team. So far has taken it all the way up to the high ground tower, and meanwhile in that bot lane have managed to keep, in fact, all across the map, MeetYourMakers, you've got to give it to them. They've held on to their objectives. Although NatusVanguard in the early game looked like they were ahead of
that from above still. There you go. That from above.
To do enough. But there's going to be the Zephyrs trying to get the steal. He is going to still go over to MeetYourMakers, and now he's in a bad position, getting chased down. There's no tower to back off to. Needs to get out to the safety of his team. Clash P does not want to get caught up in that, but here's going to be the rest of NatusVanguard on the sideline. Fuse coming in on the backline, but with the ultimate takes out one member, and is actually going to continue on through to the rest of his team, trying to turn this fight around for Natus, and they might be able to do just that. He's in the middle, but Lumber gets taken down, the tank for them, alongside Malik, who's going down next. Linda's just doing so much work for the team, almost picking up the triple kill there, and they will pick up the tier 2 tower for themselves, stealing away the Mike Golem. And you can just see how much more in control by MeetYourMakers were. Although they lost the Praetor on the backline, it really didn't matter. They were still able to roll on through and get themselves a few objectives.
Yep, I like how Malik actually used Shock onto Praetor, try to pick her up. Issue with that is that, you know, you basically reject the existence of the entire team of MeetYourMakers. I mean, granted, if you do not take the Praetor out, then Praetor can just poke in from the backlines, which is something you do not want as well. Issue is that your team do not quite have the sustain like the side of MeetYourMakers, but now Chipmunk.
Ooh, it looks like Chipmunk might have gone in too deep, could get caught out. Ash on that Zapdos might be able to pick up the kill in return, but needs to respect the damage coming out from MeetYourMakers, trying to get back to the safety of his tower, and team is able to do just that. And this is the thing that we find with MeetYourMakers, even if they get caught out, their repositioning and continued positioning is so much better than NatusVanguard. And that was the same to go through for the first game. I talked about MeetYourMakers when they are fighting as a team, and they get to this team fight kind of stage. They did a bit earlier in the previous game. They really start to shine, and we're going to see that now as they are pressuring the top high ground tower as well as the mid lane. And there's going to be the re-engagement coming through from the side of Norse with the ultimate from the Malik, but there's going to be Metamorphosis to push back the enemy team. Ultimate go through, and they pick up the kill onto Slims, but they do trade out. However, MeetYourMakers looking like they should be able to win this fight, could go through for the game, pushing Clash P back to the base. Actually, Big Paws with very little health, catching up the Malik. Meanwhile, they still have 3 members up of their own. They're going to go for the core. And game number 2 going over to Meet Your Makers. That is match 1, 2-0 fashion for them. And wow, did they impress. For a team going up against NatusVanguard, who really looked like they had the early game, Meet Your Makers just stayed strong, calm, composed, and they pulled on through with impressive performance there. We do see the replay, but I've spoken enough. I'll hand it off to you, Luxuria.
Yep, so we see now a shot comes through. Fuse tries to start the team fight, and now we see Ash goes in really, really deep, able to pick up Forsaken, like that is the key target. But then Forsaken at the same time picking up that of Slims as well. And with that, it is just down to, just look at this team fight. Fuse just can't get to Shashwat at all. Allow Shashwat to just back off, baited the Fuse into the entirety of Meet Your Makers, and that was pretty much GG. Like I mentioned, and you mentioned earlier on as well, Malak hasn't seen quite a lot of success. It is just down because to the use of shock, right? You use it wrongly, you place yourself in a very unfavorable position, and then you just get blown up, like what you saw just now. And that's a very good metamorphosis coming through as well. But Forsaken, however, in that early game, really gave Zephys too many items. I mean, let's just look at it. You know, Forsaken on that Lindis, I mean, granted, Lindis not the best mid laner there is, but it is just the patrol squad coming out from the side of NatusVanguard that has really shown that how good their team can and will be. But it just allowed, you know, once again, Meet Your Makers to just slowly scale. They did not have enough pressure to go in for the snowball.
Wow, yeah, that's what I mean there. The Malak pick, I think, is similar to that of, you mentioned, the shock ability. Ultimate going in with that kind of engagement is similar to when you go in with the Thane using the charge to initiate a team fight. However, the opposite is that Thane is able to tank up such damage. Malak only to a certain extent, and rarely needs the rest of the team to be there to back him up. You saw a few successful fights go in favor of the side of NatusVanguard, but really when it came down to team play and positioning, and I talked about this, the way that the side of Meet Your Makers were able to roll on through, it didn't really matter that they lost for Praetor in some of the team fights there, because they had so much damage output elsewhere, as well as the tankiness and frontline engagement. You saw when Malak jumped in that last fight, the reaction to that was to hold on to the Crash Ultimate, the Metamorphosis, and use that to then bait them in and then stun them up for your team to lay down the damage and then turn the team fights around. And I think Meet Your Makers just did a great job as soon as they were able to get to that point of the game. It did look a bit more warring in the second game, I'm going to be honest, with the start that NatusVanguard had. I was thinking that it would be game number 2 to the side of NatusVanguard if they kept it up, but they just started slipping. And it's, as you mentioned, Meet Your Makers, they had to make those small adjustments to their team. And I think it was more the fact they had to make the adjustments in terms of positioning. And once they had enough farm, that they were allowed to get the man advantage of these team fights, that is where they started to get that comeback happening for themselves.